Top Med Talk.
Well, hello and welcome to Top Med Talk. I'm Desiree, Chappell, your host, and we're coming to you from EBPOM Las Vegas. It's our first meeting of 2021. Now, EBPOM stands for Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine, in case you haven't heard. And it's a multinational organization, been around for about 20 years. And joining us today is my co-host, editor-in-chief of Top Med Talk, and founder of EBPOM is Monty Mythen. Hello, Monty.
Hey, Desiree.
One of the aspects that I love about EBPOM is our collaboration with our industry partners. Now, this past year in 2020, with all the craziness, we never could have done EBPOM the way we did it and reached, I think, was it over 15,000 global delegates for our meeting?
Yeah, it was fantastic. We went virtual and we did our meeting in virtual London, which were, up into the close to the 10,000. We then had virtual Chicago and then virtual Dingle in Ireland. And at the end of it, it's about 15,000+ people from around the world. And our podcast series, which is also free, open access medical education, went over the 1 million downloads. So yes. Thank you to all of our industry partners. We couldn't do it this way without your support and your help.
Absolutely. So in 2021, we thought, what a better way to say thank you than to do some podcasts with our industry partners. And so today is our first of those, again, heading out on the Top Med Talk stage and also through our Top Med Talk platform. We have the great pleasure to speak with the CEO from MDoloris Medical Systems, which is one of our sponsors for our meeting. So I have the pleasure to introduce Fabian Pagniez from France. He is the CEO of MDoloris. Fabian, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Desiree. Good afternoon, Monty, and Happy New Year to everybody. It's my pleasure to be here.
First of all, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My name is Fabian Pagniez. I am CEO and founder of the company. The company is called MDoloris Medical Systems and was established in June 2010. I have myself a master in biomedical engineering and an executive MBA in finance and 3 kids.
So 2010, you guys have been around for a little bit. Tell us about the technology that you have.
We have a Wearable technology, which is able to assess continuously and non-invasively the autonomic nervous system of the patients, and more precisely, the parasympathetic tone itself, through some sensors that you just have to stack, proprietary sensors, that you just have to stack on the chest of the patients. And if it's not possible due to surgical reasons, you can also apply the sensors on the back. It does not change anything. As long as we have a correct ECG signal, it works. And that technology from the ECG signal is able to extract the high frequency component of the heart rate variability signal, which is correlated to the parasympathetic tone. And this is the index that we do provide to the clinicians through 3 technologies. One dedicated for all the patients older than 2 years old, which is called the ANI technology. One for the neonates, which is called the NIPE, and one for the pets, and more precisely cats, horses, and dogs, who has to go under general anesthesia as well. So 80% of our devices are used under general anesthesia. 20% in the ICU. Obviously, this is exactly the opposite for the neonatal technology, because this technology is mainly used in the neonatal ICUs, but also in the neonatal ORs. And our devices we have so far, so as you said, the company was established in 10 years back. Now we are operating in 73 countries. We have a bit more than 3,500 devices on the field, and something like 250,000 patients benefited from our know-how in all of those countries. And thanks to the scientific recognition that we've been able to establish, we've been able to raise the interest of some major players that decided, among all the other technologies available worldwide, all of them decided to sign with MDoloris Medical Systems, because they concluded that we have in hand the tool that is the most reliable, sensitive, and efficient to assess nociception and anti-nociception during general anesthesia. So we have a worldwide partnership that was signed with Massimo, with a product released in Europe last year, and a worldwide promotion of that solution. And then we have 2 additional worldwide OEM partnerships that have been signed, but which I cannot disclose right now. But really, really shortly, you will have some news on that point, at least Q1 this year.
Oh, great. And OEM stands for?
OEM stands for an integration of the algorithm from MDoloris Medical Systems into, for instance, the devices of Massimo.
Sure, gotcha. Modules and things like that.
Modules, exactly. Yeah.
So, Fabian, we've done a little bit on TopMed Talk before about the concept of nociceptive monitoring. So and we'll take this at different levels, but for the average practitioner, it's a pain monitor. Is that correct? I know it's more complicated than that nociception is different from how we feel pain, but it allows us to adjust our pain relieving meds in a more sophisticated fashion.
Yeah, correct. Let's call it analgesia monitor, if you want. It makes more sense.
And we know it's a longer story for another day, but when you trigger the pain signals in your body is different to whether you're perceiving pain, but they're all relevant and we should be customizing our treatment to get that balance just right.
Yeah, correct. And what all the physicians have to keep in mind is that what we are able to do with our devices is to assess the parasympathetic tone. Within the parasympathetic tone equation, we have 2 components: nociception, so pain felt by the body, let's call it like this, and psychological stress, so the way your cortex interpret this signal coming from the body. So if you use our devices on an unconscious patient, then there's just one component, nociception. And indeed, as you said it, then it can be used as an analgesia monitoring solution in order to make sure that we will tailor, adapt, personalize exactly the amount of opioid or non-opioid drugs used under general anesthesia to cover pain due to the surgery. Let's call it this way, okay? Or nociception, more exactly. But if you use our devices on conscious patients, then psychological stress impact as well the parameter that the monitor will display continuously each second. So then this technology is used as a well-being, a comfort monitoring technology, not only pain.
And if I may, Desiree, do one more question. If your autonomic system is a little bit broken to start with, if you're a bad diabetic or you're taking a collection of drugs that make you a bit dysautonomic, maybe you have a bit of hypotension when you stand up. Have you managed all of that in your algorithms somehow?
No, you're right. To be a bit more precise regarding the technology itself, what our devices are able to assess continuously is how powerful is the parasympathetic reflex loop that all the mammals have. This loop starts in the lungs, making connection to the thalamus, and through the vagus nerve, connected to the heart. So when you are comfortable, when you are not in pain, then you have a dominant parasympathetic tone. Then you have a powerful loop. Then when you breathe in, the loop works and increases your heart rate. When you breathe out, the opposite. If you're under pain, you will fight against that pain. And your organism will raise the sympathetic tone, and obviously due to the balance, we'll have to decrease the parasympathetic tone. And this loop, which we monitor constantly, will become weaker and weaker, and the index will drop. So to answer your question, we have some limitations. And all the limitations, if you keep in mind that loop, you have all the limitations in mind. We need a patient that is breathing. So we will never, for instance, be able to assess how painful is an intubation process because the patient is in apnea.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
We need a thalamus. So that's the reason why we have developed a VET application. We need a thalamus, so it's possible to use that technology on all the mammals. And then we need a sinus node driven by the parasympathetic reflex loop. So if you give to your patient a parasympatholytic drug, let's say a bolus of atropine, for instance, then you cut the loop, you cut the link, and the monitor becomes blinded. But what is important to keep in mind is that we have developed a specific algorithm in order to make sure that once an index is displayed on the screen of the device, the index is reliable. So we have a second parameter that is displayed on the screen, which is correlated to how powerful is the full autonomic nervous system of the patient. So if that index goes up to the normal thresholds, it means that it's not possible, it's not physiological. So we will hide the parameter. If it's below the same, it's not physiological, so we will hide the parameter. So, and to answer more precisely your question, we do not have any scientific evidence published so far on patients suffering from dysautonomia or obesity and maternity and so on. But we have some feedbacks of physicians and anesthesiologists mainly that told us that the index seems to be reliable.
Mm-hmm.
But we have many publications on many other topics.
Yeah. And I was to say, and you get a baseline, and this is kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it, but you would get a baseline for the patient. So you're kind of trending off that baseline anyway.
You don't need any baseline. And we have we've made a lot of clinical investigations for that. Mm-hmm. So you will have an index that will move from 0 to 100. Mm-hmm. 0% of parasympathetic tone, 100% of parasympathetic tone. And all the publications, all of them, so far, made evidence that the normal values, including for the babies, is the same thing. The normal values to be targeted under general anesthesia, are between 50 and 70. Between 50 and 70, the amount of opioids is covering nociception. And this is especially interesting when you use opioids like remifentanil, for instance. Mm-hmm. Which have a very short half-life. But it's also interesting when you use Tiva or Evoc. So as long as you are in this normal range, everything is okay. If you are below, it means that the patient start to react to nociception, start to react to pain. And the way the patient will react is by raising the sympathetic tone. Mm-hmm. And once the patient start to react to nociception, then you will see the hemodynamic response. You will see a raise of blood pressure, you will see a raise of heart rate, and the main risk of being in this underdosage range is the inflammation response that we have absolutely to avoid. Second situation, if you are above 70, you are in the overdosage range. And this is on the worldwide base. Most of the time, before you start to use our devices, the patients are overdosed. But when you are in that overdosage range, the main risks are bradycardia, respiratory failure, longer time of recovery, immunosuppression. So if a patient is suffering from a cancer, there's a risk. Longer time of recovery, I said it, nausea and vomiting. So there are postoperative hyperalgesia. I forgot to say that, but it's a really hot topic in most of the developed markets.
Repeat that again. What was it?
Postoperative hyperalgesia, meaning
hyperalgesia,
hyperalgesia, the patient
rebound you get sometimes with the. I think you said, Fabian, we were chatting before we switched the cameras on, that as part of your history, you worked with depth of anesthesia monitoring at some stage. It sounds as though it's a similar sort of idea from the point of view of the fact that there's a lot of education to be done and there's a lot of learning by doing to be done. But once you get in the groove with it, as we have done now with depth of anesthesia monitoring, that you can adapt to the nuances. But for most patients, it's, as you say, an analgesia monitor. And we should be able to use it a bit like our BIS or whatever other monitors we're using.
Exactly. We are talking about the triangle of general anesthesia, and MDoloris Medical Systems is answering the last part that was not answered by the industry yet, the reflex depression. So we have depth of anesthesia, which is the EEG technologies and so on, that the BIS, SEDline, the entropy and so on. We have the myorelaxation, which is a TOF and MT technologies. And then we have reflex depression, and this is MDoloris Medical Systems. In any case, if you want to assess analgesia, or if you want to develop an analgesia monitoring tool, an analgesia monitoring monitor device, you have to find out the way to assess continuously the autonomic nervous system. This is the autonomic nervous system that is the key. And the technology that we have developed in France took 23 years to be developed by a French research lab, which is, by the way, INSERM labelized. So this is the highest recognition you could get on the French market in terms of research and development. And this technology has made evidence of its reliability through now more than 200 peer-reviewed scientific publications coming from everywhere, Asia, Europe, USA as well, Latin America, everywhere.
One more kind of clinical type question. In the world of opioid-free, opioid-sparing technique intraoperatively for our patients, we're doing a ton of TIVA or total IV anesthesia, multimodal pain, where, we're using all types of adjuncts, ketamine, magnesium, dexmedetomidine, all these things that can affect, the sympathetic, parasympathetic system, and doing a lot of regional anesthesia. So, different types of blocks. How does this work? I mean, does it work in these patients? And is there a benefit to using that?
Absolutely. It works. We have a growing amount of hospitals that are using the NI technology, especially for the OFA process.
Opioid-free.
Opioid-free anesthesia. Yes, correct. It works independently from the fact that you're using an opioid or a non-opioid. With alpha-2 agonist, it works as well. With Dex, it works as well. Yeah. We have some scientific evidences to make evidence of that. And with the same, by the way, it's interesting, with the same normal range. So over 70, you are over titrating the Dex and so on.
That's interesting.
So yes, it's technology that is definitely used on that kind of processes. And it's used as well with ERAS, enhanced recovery, and multimodal analgesia. So it helps the clinicians to really understand how impacted is the autonomic nervous system of my patient on a live base, each second, due to the drugs that I'm giving to my patient.
And then in the case of regional anesthesia where we're doing blocks, I guess it can get kind of boring if it's a good block.
Yeah, but you may have the answer that the block is not working.
Yeah.
And back to the OFA topic, we have some really well-known university hospitals that are promoting the use of the NI technology. And I'm thinking out of the blue of, in Bruges, Professor Mullier, who is one of the Pope of the OFA.
Absolutely. From a beautiful place.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, we talked, you said there's over 200 publications, right? So it's well documented. It's becoming well documented in the literature, the usage. Talk to us a little bit about where it's approved and how we can use it, say in the US and in the UK. That's where a lot of our listeners come from, but we do have a global audience.
The technology is CE marked. So in Europe, everything is okay. As I said, we are in 73 countries, so including in Brazil, Mexico, and several countries in Asia. In Canada, it's also registered. But in the US, the FDA registration process is quite complex, as you may know, and requires a lot of investment. So we've been able to go through a 510K process. But with the 510K process, you have some restrictions in the claims that you are allowed to promote locally. So in the US, we have a technology that is allowed to be sold and promoted as a technology that is able to assess the high frequency viability of the HRV. So which is, for the time being, not that simple to promote. So that's the reason why we have decided to invest in a multi-site clinical trial involving 4 university hospitals in the US, which clinical trial should end of Q2 2021, which will allow us to come back to the FDA to discuss with them and to have the right claim back, which will be, and we want it to be, analgesia monitoring monitor. This technology, to make it simple, shall be available in the US end of 2021.
And historically, we usually all end up in the same place on the approval front. I mean, for some reason, occasionally something gets thrown up. You, Desiree, for example, have had liposomally encapsulated local anesthetics that have a longer duration of action for a long time now. I think we're only just getting them here and vice versa. So, but usually the regulators end up in the same place. For some reason, there's a little disconnect sometimes. So,
yeah. Fabian, tell us a little bit about how this technology has been used in COVID patients.
Let me tell you the story of this discovery. As I told you, this technology is mainly used, 80% of our devices are used under general anesthesia, because this is where the real need is. When you have a patient that is ASA 2, 3, 4, with a long surgery at risk, plus dysautonomia, plus blah, 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 then you really need some devices to make sure that you will tailor everything. End of 2019, because we do have some activities in Asia, we were a bit afraid of the COVID that appeared in China and that quickly spread in Asia. So we decided with our medical director, who is brilliant, whose name is Ignacio Gonzalez, we decided to try to investigate how devices, how brand new technology can help physicians to handle COVID-19 patients. And we proposed our ideas to several university hospitals. Some of them decided to follow and set up a protocol and check what we had in mind. We have so far 2 publications, and several additional clinical investigations are in progress in Europe, in Latin America, and also on septic patients suffering from sepsis and patients suffering from ARDS, because we think that we can have exactly the same clinical outcome for such kind of patients. And in 2020, during the first lockdown, appeared the first results showing that if we use the ANI technology, the adult technology, on a COVID-positive patient in the ICU, so I'm talking about a patient that is ventilated, obviously, then we are able to prevent the side effects due to the overdosage. So I'm talking about respiratory depression, which is quite important for a patient suffering from COVID. And I'm talking as well about the inflammation response, which is also important for a patient suffering from a virus, any of those. So with just those arguments, we were completely happy, excited, and then willing to help the clinicians to fight against these virus. And then we discovered a third argument, positive outcome, clinical outcome, which is the capability of our device to predict mortality in advance. If the treatment is kept as it is, obviously, if you change something, then you give to the patient another chance. But to make it simple, as I told you, we have 2 indexes. We have one index which is correlated to the parasympathetic tone, the main parameter that we are promoting. And we have another index which is able to assess how powerful is the full autonomic nervous system. And when you have a patient that is suffering from an infection and that is fighting against the infection for a long time, the autonomic nervous system starts to get exhausted and exhausted and exhausted and exhausted until a point when the autonomic nervous system is not, the balance is disturbed between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic and so on. And we are able to monitor that time.
And you completely lose that natural variability, which is not a healthy sign.
Exactly.
So some of the COVID patients, I was in COVID ICU at last weekend, and some of them have remarkably stable hemodynamics in a way that make you a bit worried. Obviously, just eyeballing them. But this puts an index on it. Now we have to be. I'm sure we have to just point out these are exploratory discussions. This is off-label at the moment, I'm guessing, but great research work, and makes complete sense to me that it would help guide your understanding of where you are in the inflammatory pathway.
And we do have now some European university hospitals that and Latin Americans one that decided to recommend the use of the NI technology on the COVID positive patients formally.
Well, I must do a follow-up interview about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely touch back on that in the weeks and months to come for sure. Well, just as we're wrapping up, Fabian, tell us a little bit about where you think the future is going with your technology and this technology in general. I know, there's a lot of discussion about closed loop. We've talked about that in the hemodynamic world. Tell us where you think it's going.
On the general standpoint, I do strongly believe that within the next 3-5 years, such kind of technology, I'm not talking only about MDoloris, but a technology that is able to assess the autonomic nervous system and to provide a clinical adding value for the clinicians. So such kind of technology will be used on a daily basis. especially in the OR, ICU. So we have a real strong clinical added value. But we also believe that we have a strong clinical added value for conscious patients, but who are not able to communicate. Obviously, a patient that is able to communicate is just say, okay, out of a ranking between 0 and 100, my pain is there, and that's okay. Although it's quite subjective, but that's okay. But for a patient that is not able to communicate, I'm talking about babies, I'm talking about patients suffering from multiple disabilities, I'm talking about autistic patients. And the most important for me, and where I really want to provide a help, is patients suffering from the end of life, palliative cares. Because most of the time, patients during the last days of life, they lose the ability to communicate. And this is obviously extremely important for the clinicians to make sure that the well-being of the patient will be optimized. And this is incredibly important for the family. And we do have in hand, MDoloris, we do have in hand the technology that is able, again, to assess the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic tone. And the parasympathetic tone is responsible for well-being. Yeah. So we can provide, and we have some clinical data now. Because we've been able, out of the past 2 years, to start to investigate and check whether our technology can provide a clinical added value in the palliative cares department of some university hospitals that are really well known for their knowledge on this specific topic. We got one publication, if my memory is not wrong, but we have many additional papers that are going to come. And we got feedbacks from clinicians saying, I don't want to give you back your device. I want to keep it with me because before I do, I don't know how I was able to really answer that question or treat my patients correctly. So we really have something to do. And the topic of MDoloris is really to help the clinicians to increase the quality of care. And this is why we are working that hard and sweating and stress and blah, blah, blah. So we have decided to invest, starting from this year, in a wearable technology. This wearable technology will consist in a wearable sensor that you will have like a bracelet on the arm. This device will capture the ECG signal constantly, will forward it to a cloud, so internet, okay, where the algorithm will be. The algorithm will digest in real time that signal in order to send you back on your smartphone on a live base the well-being level of the person that is connected to the wearable sensor. So your mother, your children, your husband, wherever you are in the world, as long as you have an internet connection. So this is the first topic that we have decided to invest in recently. And the second one is a bit more old because we know that our technology works perfectly well in the OR. We decided to close the loop. We decided to develop a device that will make the interface between the patient and the ANI monitor, and which will drive directly the pumps in order to be much more precise and to avoid, again, the endpoint is always the same, to avoid the side effects of overdosage, the side effect of underdosage. We have a prototype developed, working currently, being tested at the University Hospital of Lille, so CPP approval done and so on and so on. And the physicians are really enthusiastic. And they told us that before being equipped with an ENI monitor and after, you have a reduction in average, a reduction between 30 and 70% of the opioid delivery. Wow. Between the ENI monitor and the loop, you have a reduction again of a half. So that's a really great product that will make a lot of noise. But on a regulatory standpoint, it's a bit more complex to release because it's a class 3. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So it provides a lot of headaches, but we will do our best.
And we've spoken a little bit last year about closed loops, and in particular the idea of fly by wire. In other words, that the clinician, Desiree, for example, sets the level that she wants the AIN to be at, and then we let the monitor speak to the drug administering device on behalf of the patient. So she's still calling the shots, if you see what I mean. It's just a bit more like cruise control, or it's just better. Yeah. So
exactly.
It's not taking away clinical. Yeah.
It's an autopilot.
Yeah.
When you take a plane and you go overseas, you have the autopilot is taking care of everything, but you have a pilot that is here in security.
Yeah.
And this is going to be exactly the same.
We're saying there's a reasons they don't let the humans fly the planes anymore because they're too complicated.
They crash them.
We're just slow catching up. Yeah. So I've got a list of about 10 follow-up episodes that we need to do. Really, really, really important work.
Yeah.
And I know people are going to want to know a lot more about this.
Yeah.
As an industry partner, you're in our exhibition, what used to be the trade exhibition, but you're in our virtual conference center. You're in there and people can go in and find all about you and information and contact details, which is fantastic. So thank you very much again for your excellent work, and thank you very much for your sponsorship. Desiree.
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem. A pleasure.
Yeah. So we'll definitely put all the contact information there. We'll put all the contact information on the podcast, which will go out on Top Med Talk platform. So if you've missed it or want to listen to this again, you can definitely do that on Top Med Talk. And Fabian, I just can't tell you how much we really appreciate you spending time with us today. This was a fascinating conversation. Like I said, I'm really excited personally to get my hands on this technology and see, how it works in the OR. So that's really great. So good luck with all the work that you guys are doing this year, and the COVID stuff that you all are working on. We'll definitely want to hear more about that for sure. So good luck, and talk to you soon on that.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So thanks again, everyone, for listening to Top Med Talk. You know where you can always find us at topmedtalk.com and on your favorite social media platform. Thanks for listening today to EBPOM. And again, check out all the upcoming meetings. Cheers, everyone.
Top Med Talk. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.